October 3rd, 2025. If you were online that night, you remember the feeling. A bright, restless world going quiet all at once, like a radio station slipping between stations just as the song hits the chorus. A rover on Mars stitched 20 frames of a harmless-looking sky. And in one of those frames, frame 17, column 304 if you want to be precise, there was the faintest fingerprint of something that shouldn't have been there. A smear not quite vertical, a whisper of motion where there should have been none. The file auto-published as usual, uncelebrated and unloved. And somewhere between Pasadena and your phone screen, the country furloughed 15,000 scientists, engineers, techs, and comms people whose job it would have been to say, calm down. It's noise. They were locked out of their logins. The feeds went still, and the world filled the silence with teeth. You don't have to be a believer to be hooked by coincidence. A verified interstellar object, 3I Atlas, had been drifting toward its date with the inner system, hugging the ecliptic like it was following a string someone had tugged taut. Astronomers had already argued themselves hoarse about its mass, its coma pointing toward the sun instead of away, its nickel lines without iron like steel slag fallen into snow. It was already odd, but the Perseverance smudge timed to the minute with a deadened agency felt like a stage cue. It's human to lean forward then. It's human to forget how often the universe is an unashamed prankster. Within hours, the smear had a shape because the internet refuses to leave a good blank alone. Big circles, thick arrows, enhanced crops, and sharpened pixels. Cigar, monolith, cylinder, a cosmic thumb drive. The language jumped from cautious to breathless and never looked back. People drew shadows that weren't there. They drew inscriptions that weren't there. They wrote ARK as a joke and watched their joke become someone else's testimony. When a rover gives you a Rorschach, your own mind comes out of it looking huge and convincing. You might ask, where were the orbiters? That's the question that stuck even to the skeptics. Why a surface rover and not the sky's own cameras? The orbiters were operating. Everyone could see their scheduled passes on the Deep Space Network logs. But the names who translate telemetry into pictures and pictures into context were home, checking their work email every hour out of muscle memory and getting the same bright red bar. Access denied. ESA confirmed Mars Express and TGO had successful runs, then added the bureaucrat's prayer. Pending cross-checks. Artifact analysis, interagency alignment. The press wanted images. The press got footnotes. The vacuum hissed. That was when a small name nobody thought about in August started to look prophetic. Bertie Dworsky and her little team, who treat consciousness like a sensor and the future like a weak radio signal, had posted a stack of remote viewing logs a month before the Perseverance blur. A device inside ice, they said. Thumb drive-sized, pulsing, masked, camouflaged graffiti on the shell. Concealment, not accident. It was harmless in August, the sort of fringe you scroll past with a smile. In October, it had edges that aligned with the new myth. People screenshotted the timestamps like courtroom exhibits. Scientists rolled their eyes hard enough to hurt. But no scientist could log into the media account to tell you that Dworsky is not a method, and a meme with a head start is a dangerous animal. Imagine the physics forums those first days. Earnest people drawing ephemerides on their lunch breaks. Amateurs with rigorous hearts tracing parallax by hand. Somebody in the back suggesting a reasonable cosmic ray hit and getting buried under gifs of monoliths. The honest one said alignment is uncanny. The honest one said ambiguity is a drug. The rest of us rode the high of maybe. Meanwhile, within mission control buildings that suddenly felt like empty cathedrals, the Deep Space Network kept catching. Dishes turned, the skies whispered down, packets stacked in queues. Automation did what automation was meant to do, except checksum, archive, forward. But the pipeline is a living thing, and the living parts, those humans with their years of intuition about compression wrinkles and radiation freckles, were missing. Scripps flagged oddities and filed them in the drawer labeled Needs Human. The drawer filled. Then it overfilled. Then it became a hallway of drawers. In Darmstadt, in Pasadena, in Madrid, in suits that used to fit when the world was younger, managers decided to wait for the all-clear before pushing anything sensitive public. Interagency alignment again, because nobody wants to be the first to publish an artifact that turns out to be a piece of the software's own reflection. If this were a tidy story, a named hero would appear. The closest we got was a loud, clear voice with a resume, Dr. Avi Lowe, who was allergic to secrecy and in love with cameras. He said what a lot of quieter people were thinking. Release the frames. He made a list of testable anomalies and read it into every microphone that would hold still long enough. The cylinder narrative was silly, he said, but silences breed sillier things. He wasn't asking you to believe. He was asking to see. What we had instead were 7 odd facts about Atlas. None of them alone a confession. All of them together a confession-shaped shadow. First, the mass behavior, venting without the jitters. Less than 15 meters per day squared in trajectory change when a normal comet would wander like a drunk mapmaker. Second, the coma pointing toward the sun as if light itself were sticky. Third, nickel lines standing tall where iron hid like it owed someone money. A signature mortal's associate with refineries, not nebulae. Fourth, that polarimetry reading, 2.77% at 7 degrees and inversion around 17. Fifth, the orbit like a straightedge had been pressed to the solar plane. Sixth, the galling timing. Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and a chain you'd pick if you were trying to show off. Seventh, a path within 9 degrees of the patch of sky where the old WOW signal once flared like a dare. 7 is a pretty number. It makes tidy YouTube thumbnails. But science doesn't care about pretty. It cares about independence. If those oddities were entangled, you couldn't multiply their unlikeliness into a miracle. If they were separate, you had a very strange guest. While the object with our attention slid toward its October 29th perihelion, other sky things strolled onto the stage uninvited. A microasteroid skimmed just 419 kilometers above Antarctica on October 2nd, the cosmic equivalent of a razor burn we didn't feel until 6 hours later, when the Minor Planet Center released a solution with a wobbling condition code. That's not a catastrophe. That's a reminder. The planet is a house with a lot of windows and no curtains. On Mars, detached from our fever, a happier curiosity, organics tightly collocated with Vivianite in Bright Angel and Sapphire Canyon, the leopard spots that make astrobiologists tilt their heads like dogs. Sherlock and Pixel traced delicate overlaps that on Earth would mean this mineral held onto biosignatures so gently that time itself forgot to eat them. If there had been a normal month, you would have seen an ecstatic press conference with 40 careful caveats and 1 trembling smile. Instead, the most promising biosignature candidate slouched into a calendar where no one had budget or breath to celebrate it, where even cheer had to wait for payroll. The sun wouldn't wait. Coronal holes shouted a fast wind into our faces and threw minor CMEs into the slipstream. Auroras draped down to latitudes that don't have vocabulary for them. People dragged lawn chairs into backyards that had never in living memory been under green, and gasped with that private gasp you don't talk about without sounding religious. Satellites took it on the chin and kept tumbling data down, like old boxers with more pride than good sense. Perihelion came like a held breath exhaled too slowly to notice at first. At 136 AU, Atlas skimmed its closest distance to the sun and kept most of its secrets if there were secrets to keep. In a quiet room far from any parliamentary camera, a handful of ESA engineers pointed the JUICE spacecraft's hungry eyes and silent microphones and recorded the loneliest homework assignment a machine can receive. Watch. From November 2nd forward, for almost 3 weeks, JUICE did just that. Spectrometers sniffed for weird chemistry. Cameras hunted for coughing jets or clandestine thrust. The raw numbers looked boring. Boring is the hardest kind of exciting to publish. From Earth after the glare, reacquisition started like the first notes of a familiar song. Telescopes gloomed across the world in chilly pre-dawns, and JPL analysts, the ones who'd been locked out of their tools for the longest week of their lives, pulled new parallax into old models and asked the models if they were still friends. December 19th offered the relative approach you'd call close at a family reunion. Close enough to see new detail, not close enough to make anyone sweat sunscreen. If you listened to the recordings from those nights, you would hear a lot of quiet typing and the occasional chair creak, and then the soft, serifed profanity mathematicians save for small numbers becoming interesting. The trajectory was off by a little. A measurable little. Something between nobody cares and tell me more. If you wanted to live inside the maybe, it was thrust. If you wanted to sleep, it was error bars singing old songs. Parallel to that orchestrated attention, other screens flickered with a video shot continents away. A spherical object filmed over Yemen, taking a hellfire's kiss and continuing like the bad physics in an expensive movie. briefed in a hearing room where microphones metaphored sobriety. The clip was unclassified but unhoused. It didn't explain itself. The official word afterward was a shrug dressed in a suit. People with medals asked for patience. People without asked for better stories. As if the sky decided to keep the theme of green, 3 comets waxed into view in the same handful of weeks. Lemon and Friends, each burning emerald because carbon diatomic and cyanogen glow that color when sunlight pokes them. Magnitude 4, maybe 3. The sort of modest miracle that makes a person who has never looked up before put on a sweater and look up now. The internet christened them with the sort of names that would embarrass astronomers and delight poets. It felt for a moment like the dome above us had planned a parade. On the pad and across the sea, human machines rehearsed their argument with gravity. Starship Flight 11 did something that would have been ridiculous to promise 10 years ago, and routine to narrate now. It landed what shouldn't land, then relit through injury to show that future missions could tolerate uglier days. The payload was simulated, the tile deletion deliberate, the applause genuine, a line in the story you could point to later and say, see, not everything depended on better budgets or kinder politics. China's Tanwen, too, brisk and businesslike, lined itself up to taste Kamawalewa and later 3-on-11p, planning to carry a little of both home so future grad students could write impossible theses. In a year that asked whether institutions can still dream when they're tired, a few answered yes. They did it in the grammar only rockets and sample arms speak. The furloughs number, 15,000, is an engraving now. If you don't work in those buildings, it's easy to treat it as a headline count. If you do, you remember whose chair was empty and what flavor of problem that person solves when the numbers misbehave. You remember which Slack channels went yellow, which tests were paused, which alarms were acknowledged by nobody for minutes that felt like hours. You remember watching auroras you were too tired to enjoy out of a parking garage because you were waiting to see if a dish would stop whining and let the downlink breathe. You remember typing your password into a login page that had become a tombstone and watching it not care. You remember the very particular speed of rumor when it travels by text, quick enough to make your stomach lurch, slow enough to feel individualized and therefore plausible. At 03:17 UTC-1 mid-December night, Goldstone's DSN-34 recorded what later memos would not call a signal, a narrow band near 1420-36 MHz, the hydrogen line where those who fantasize about deliberate messages always build their first radio. 104 seconds. Anomaly, the log said. Cross-correlated. Then the log went missing in a sea of other logs, and you can tell the story any way that comforts you. In one version, it was interference, and someone with a responsible title removed it to stop 100 frantic emails from spinning into 1,000 breathless posts. In another version, it was exactly what it looked like to the part of your brain that lives at the back of your skull and never evolved beyond campfires. Tell another small story because small stories behave better than big ones. A technician named R. Singh had a habit she got from her first manager in her first month. When something pings the hydrogen band, you copy it to a thumb drive before you write a note about it. You don't share it widely. You don't pretend it's a paragraph from God. You file it like a good squirrel. You sleep, you wake. And if the official archive no longer has what you remember seeing, you quietly send a checksum to 3 people you trust like family and ask them to tell you if you've lost your mind. What they found in the spectrogram isn't proof, but it is a pattern we try to teach computers to love. Bursts spaced like prime numbers, the sorts of intervals a physics teacher would use to tell a student, this is not a wind chime. An hour later, the file on the server was gone. The copy on the thumb drive wasn't. If you need that to be scandal, you will find fuel. If you need it to be an honest cleanup of a contaminated dataset, you will find comfort. This is a rash you can scratch both ways. Around the same time, an internal draft you will never see circled ECC emails and then evaporated. It was a bland little thing dressed in careful caveats. Preliminary models marginally prefer natural explanations for Atlas's behavior. Telemetry inconsistencies likely stem from compression reshaping. Polarization values under review. No one signed it. No one wanted to own words in a season where words once owned were treated like wagers. The external statement that did go out weeks later contained all the calories and none of the flavor. Non-typical but natural cometary behavior. Compression artifacts. Ongoing collaboration with partners. I think somewhere in the building where that sentence was born, someone laughed without humor for a full minute and then went back to work. Bayesian modelers fought the fight. Bayesian modelers were born to fight. What prior are you entitled to? If you start at 1 in a million for artificiality, how hard do 7 oddities shove the needle before you admit your feeling movement? The reply is the same one the human story serves every time it gets asked to step into a lab coat. Are your oddities independent? Does a sunward coma tell you anything about nickel without iron? Or do they both spring from the same single weird chemistry? Does a path near the wow patch stop being interesting if the sky is a crowded place where many lines cross near many other lines? The only honest answer was the one nobody wanted to print because it sells poorly. Not impossible, not persuasive, wait for more. And we did wait. In the distracted way modern people wait, with 5 other browser tabs open. Lemon's naked eye glow, a geometry of aurora above a toll road that made 1,000 commuters smile in their cars. Starship's stoic plume, Tanwin2's quiet outbound, a hearing room clip looping too fast for anyone to breathe between frames. A far-off rover nosing organics that would have been a magazine cover if the magazines hadn't turned into fighting pits. The wait became a season. You can stage this like fiction and it will read like memory anyway. In a garage with poor insulation and a better heater, a retired spectroscopist with the sort of mind that makes crosswords feel embarrassed wrote a white paper for nobody. Atlas Dossier, Rev 0. He compiled every public anomaly and every private one someone told him at a conference when the coffee was free and the chaperones were elsewhere. He drew lines like a child might because sometimes a child's geometry is more honest than an adult's logic. He kept a cautious tone but let one paragraph breathe. If natural, Atlas is nature performing a magic trick with cards we didn't know were in the deck. If artificial Atlas is a thing that learned from us the art of quiet entrances and quieter goodbyes. He didn't publish it. He emailed a PDF to 6 people of wildly different temperaments and asked them each to try to break it with a hammer. 3 tried. 3 didn't answer. 2 months later, an anonymous account posted a partial screenshot. It was almost boring. There is a way people tell stories when they want to be elegant. They end at a moment of poised uncertainty so the reader can add their own coda. But the world doesn't care about narrative shape. The world ends things because the clock ran out on someone's attention or budget or courage. In late December, the DSN recorded a 1.9-second ping from the direction of Atlas's receding path. Frequency drift matching Earth's own spin, as if the mirror you were staring into had quietly turned into a window. The content was noise until you decided it wasn't. Rhythmic bursts spaced at 0.7 seconds. If you want to, you can see primes again. If you don't, you can see harmonics. If you are paid to be careful, you write likely equipment echo. If you are paid to be brave, you write schedule follow-up at the next visibility window. If you are paid to be political, you write nothing unless someone with a bigger badge tells you to. January opened like a drawer. The furlough closed. The office is refilled with the smell of coffee and the peculiar stink of carpet that has no idea what epoch it lives in. The first official post of the year wore its Sunday clothes and addressed the public as if we were all reasonable cousins. Preliminary analyses suggest non-typical natural behavior. Some inconsistencies are compression-related. Further releases forthcoming in collaboration with partners. It made nothing worse. It didn't try to make anything better. It did what official posts do. Place a hand on your shoulder without saying whether you are being guided toward the door or the table. By then, the green comets had faded. The aurora retreated north like a rumor running out of verbs. Starship uploaded another flight computer revision and went back to choosing its weather windows. Tanwin2 hummed into its middle miles. Perseverance turned its cameras back to rocks and distances. A bureaucrat handed a stack of budget printouts to another bureaucrat and asked the question behind all the other questions. Which dreams do we keep when the math is cranky? People with more heart than leverage argued for Mars sample return, for the sort of careful audacity that makes the next century call this one generous. People with more leverage than heart asked about ROI in a voice that transforms miracles into numbers. I wish I could end with a photograph, a crisp, high-resolution frame from an orbiter showing Atlas's nucleus wearing a metal grill like a science fiction villain, or a spectrum line so neat it turns your skepticism into a keepsake, or a message with punctuation. We got none of that. We got the ache and the wonder and the mild, familiar humiliation of being a creature equipped with questions bigger than its wallet. We got frame 17 and a smudge like a suggestion. We got 7 anomalies and the statistical wisdom that 7 is not a spell. We got a hydrogen line flirtation that is either the universe winking or the instrument fogging its own mirror. We got a discipline doing what mature disciplines do, refusing to marry their first crush. We got a myth because a myth is what you get when a month refuses to behave. If there is a useful hook to carry away, it is this. Either 3i Atlas was natural and we learned that natural stretches wider than we have tools to measure, or it was not and we learned that not knows how to act casual. In both cases, the moral is the same. Look longer with more eyes. Build fewer silences. Treat the public like adults even when some of us insist on drawing monoliths on every blur. Make the pipelines resilient to politics. Save the logs twice. Teach the next century how to inherit the unmapped. Tonight, if the sky is clean, walk outside and listen with your whole body, not for pings or primes or conspiracies, but for the stunned, unscandalized fact of being alive on a planet that has learned to point cameras at other worlds. Remember that a rover whispered a maybe into our noise and we answered with a crowd, an argument, and an awkward kind of love. Remember that somewhere, beyond Jupiter's patient arithmetic, a visitor whose name we fought over is already colder than your worst winter and farther than your happiest map. It is carrying away our questions at the speed of leaving. It will not answer them. We must, and we will in fragments first, then in papers, then in classes taught by people who were in second grade when the smudge became a story and who will not remember the furlough except as a line in a footnote that makes them angry in a way that changes their
lives. There is a sound the Deep Space Network makes when
it's idle that no microphone records well. A breath held by metal. Somewhere in that breath, the night of October 3rd still hangs like a single bright hair. Somewhere in that breath, a technician keeps a private archive of 1-second anomalies. Not because she is a romantic, but because good engineering looks like superstition from far enough away. Somewhere in that breath, an agency older than many of its employees remembers the dare it was born to answer. Look, tell, and try not to blink at the wrong time. If, years from now, someone asks you what Atlas was, the honest answer will taste like unsweetened tea. It was either the weirdest natural thing we have measured, or the politest unnatural thing that is visited. It made us rehearse how to behave in the presence of either. It reminded us that budgets are stories with knives. It showed us that the speed of rumor can outrun but never replace the slow joy of proof. It left us staring at a 20-frame stack with a smear inside it, and a sky full of ordinary wonders that do not need to be anything else to be enough. And it taught us, if we were willing to learn, that the most radical act in a loud century is patient-looking, and the bravest sentence a scientist can say on camera is the one that begins, "We don't know yet."